Okay, so here's what we got, guys. First part of this unit, or the first day of this unit, we talked about the cell theory. Okay, and the cell theory had 3 points. All organisms are made up of cells. Okay, cells carry out the basic functions of the organism, and cells come from the division of existing cells. All right, those are the 3 points of the cell theory. So, if that could be a multiple choice question for sure. Which one of those 3 points is likely to be something you might want to talk about in other answers? Right, cells carry out the basic functions. That's something that you can kind of work into a lot of your written response answers on this test. Okay, there's kind of places where that would sort of fit. Okay, where you can work that in a little bit. So definitely know your cell theory. Okay, and there's only 4 people to know here, so I would know who they are. Okay, and so that would be Hooke. Okay, he's the guy who first discovered cells. Okay, then there was Leeuwenhoek. I never spell it right when it's not in front of me. Something like that. That's a W. He's the first one to view living cells. And then there was Schleiden and Schwann. Okay, they're the ones that proposed the original cell theory. Okay, so we should probably know them as well. Okay, we also talked briefly in that lesson about the similarities between plant and animal cells. And then we talked about that again and again and again and again. Is it a recurring theme? Yes, similarities between cells is something that comes up often. Okay, modes of nutrition is where that's kind of related to and stuff like that. So that's certainly something you would want to kind of go over in your mind. It's not something that's like outright in the notes where it tells you why it's important, but it's something that you need to recognize. Okay, then after we talked about the cell theory, okay, then we talked about microscopy and things like that. So certainly being able to estimate the size of an object is something that you would be required to do. Yes, on the longest dimension. Okay, size estimation, microscopy, what a proper lab diagram looks like. It'd be easy for me to make like a multiple choice question where I throw on a lab diagram and then ask you maybe what's wrong with it. Okay, as a multiple choice question or something like that, or maybe even a written response question where you have to identify the mistakes in it. And they would be format mistakes as opposed to labeling mistakes, right? Like it wouldn't be like, oh, well, you labeled the nucleus as the mitochondria. Not like that. It's like, the labels are crooked or the title's at the top or something like that. Okay. Okay. And after that, we talked about the modes of nutrition. Okay. Do you need to know the actual terms? Chemoheterotroph. Okay, so that would be animals and fungus and stuff. Whoop, chemotroph. I almost spelled it wrong. Chemoheterotroph. Okay, and photoautotroph. Okay, so definitely things that we need to know, be able to explain them, okay, things like that. I would say it's probably a good idea to make sure I can tell what you mean. Yeah. So maybe, talk about cell structure a little bit in relation to those things, okay, stuff like that. So you're definitely going to need to know modes of nutrition and how it affects cell structure. Okay, that's okay. So in the context of cell structure. Okay, because cell structure and modes of nutrition go back to the second point of the cell theory about cells having to carry out the basic functions of an organism. Making food and energy is a basic function. So definitely something that we need to be familiar with. Okay. I'm going to write cell structure right underneath cell structure again, but now I mean like labeling. Always looks like that should have 2 L's, but the spell checker always tells me it's wrong when I do it. Okay, so yes, there's going to be a diagram of a cell on the test somewhere. You don't know whether it's going to be plant or animal, and I'm not going to tell you that, okay? But there's definitely a diagram of a cell on there, so make sure you can give me the name and function of all the organelles that we have talked about within the cell. It is in color, yes, or will be. I haven't printed it yet. Okay. So yes, they will be all color diagrams. Obviously, biology kind of, that's necessary, so. The diagrams are going to be very clear, but they're going to be new, right? They're not diagrams that you've seen on the quiz, and they're not the diagrams that you have, okay? There'll be another cell, but, you know, cell structure is all pretty much the same. I can't promise that, but there's generally a color scheme to it that most people follow. Okay, then we started talking more about like how the cell functions, how the cell transports. Okay, so there's a lot of marks on the test about cell transport. Okay, more than are in the practice test that you have. Okay, that I gave you in the review package. That looks like it's weighted very heavily in terms of plants. That's not the case on your test. Yes, there are some plant questions, certainly, but there's a lot of questions that go back to cellular transport processes, including the plant questions, okay? But you definitely need to know the big three. What were the big three? Osmosis, diffusion, and active transport, okay? So you definitely have to know those. Okay, and diffusion is probably the most important one of those, because it's the only way to transport material inside the cell, okay, is by diffusion. And we talked about its limitations as well as its benefits. Benefits free, okay? Benefit works pretty good as long as cells are small, okay? So things like that. Could there be a question about the effective cell size on transport? Yeah, we did an activity on that, bank on it. There's going to be a question about cell size and transport. Okay, diffusion's a big part of that, being able to explain what we learned in that activity about cell size, transport, surface area, volume, okay, all of those kind of things, the drawbacks to diffusion, okay. Guys, so much of this test is about level of detail, okay. Now, there's a delicate balance. I'll get to you, Mason, okay. There's a delicate balance between level of detail and saying too much, okay. And that's really the hardest part of this test, is finding that balance. I said too little and I didn't get enough marks. I said too much and I contradicted myself and then I lost marks. Got to find that right balance in the middle. Okay, so if it's a 4-mark question, make sure you've got 4 marks worth of stuff down. Okay, like if I show you a picture of you know, like a plant that's curved, like is in your practice package there, okay? And I ask you what might have caused it to do that, and all you write is geotropism, it grows funny. Like that's a 1 out of 4 answer, okay? But if you tell me geotropism and then you explain that, you know, that's a curvature in response to gravity, and that's caused by auxins going to one side of the plant more than the other, and that causes cells on one side to grow faster than the other, and that's what causes the curve, that's a 4 out of 4 answer. Okay, but if I keep going and I say, and phototropism also blah, 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 then it's like, uh-oh, I said geo and photo, and now Coderre doesn't know whether I know what I'm talking about or not. Follow me there? Okay, there's too little, just right. It's like the Goldilocks. Okay, you got to have a Goldilocks answer. Okay, it's got to be just right and not too little or too much. Okay. Okay, so diffusion, then osmosis, okay? And osmosis is also pretty big because it's used everywhere, okay? I mean, cells all use it to keep a balance of salts and water concentration and stuff like that, but plants also use it, okay? And it's crucial in order for plants to transport water. So definitely be able to explain this process in detail and know its applications. Mason, sorry, I skipped you. There's only one kind of active transport. The others are endocytosis and exocytosis. That's different. I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so make sure you know that one. And then active transport, okay, remember is the little gates, okay, the carrier proteins that are on the cell membrane that uses energy and change the shape of the protein, but not the shape of the membrane. Okay, all right, so this one goes against the gradient. It pumps from low to high. These other ones both go from high to low. They're passive. Those are all details that you need to remember. So yes, there's memorization, but biology isn't all memorization. It's memorize the facts and then apply them. Okay, and it's the application part that people often struggle with. Okay, it's like, well, I know the stuff, I knew everything. I know you knew everything, but just knowing it only makes you good at Trivial Pursuit. It doesn't make you good at science. You have to know, how does that apply to this situation? And so many of the questions on this test are situational. Okay, here's a situation a cell finds itself in. What's going to happen? Explain what's going to happen using your knowledge of cell transport. If a question gives you a tip like that, is it important? Yeah, if the question says, in the context of this thing that we talked about, answer this question, talk about that. Okay, don't talk about something else. Right? If it specifically says, in the context of cell transport, talk about cell transport. Okay, don't talk about modes of nutrition. Okay, everybody follow there. Okay, now, Mason, you were asking about the other three methods we talked about. Actually, it's four. Okay, there's exocytosis, the way everything gets out of the cell, and then there's the phagocytosis, pinocytosis, and receptor mediated. Those are all minor. Okay, like they're not big, and they all involve the membrane changing shape. So they're not active transport. They're like engulfing or excreting of things. Okay, so it's different than these three, right? They are nowhere near as important as the big three, right? Know what they are. Like if I showed you a picture of one on a multiple choice question, you'd be able to tell me whether it was pinocytosis or receptor mediated endocytosis. That's about the extent to which you need to know them, all right? In the written response item, those are probably not part of them, okay? I'm looking more at the big three for those. Okay, cell transport, cell size and transport. Okay, next thing was multicellularity. What number are we on? 6. This was 5. Okay, you need to know the difference between a true multicellular organism and a colony of cooperating cells. All right, we talked about how those things were different. What was the key difference between a colony and a true multicellular organism? Specialization. Okay, so cells that are eukaryotic, that reminds me, I forgot to talk about that earlier. I'll go back to that. Okay, eukaryotic cells, because they have different organelles in them, can start having different numbers of those organelles, become specialized to do a certain job. Okay, that leads to the development of tissue, and then you get a true multicellular organism with organs and organ systems and things like that. All right, so specialization is the key ingredients, okay, or key identifying factor of multicellularity. Okay, what were the advantages? Okay, we talked about those. Okay, and that's that whole surface area to volume thing. Okay, multicellularity overcomes that problem. Be able to explain things like that, or recognize when a question is presenting you with that situation. Okay, I'm going to back up because I forgot to talk about in cell structure here. Okay, eukaryotic versus prokaryotic. Okay, what was the term that separated them? Also a really long word. Compartmentalization, right. Okay, so that's what essentially makes all the organelles, and why is it important to have organelles? Okay, we talked quite a bit about that, right, in lesson 5. Okay, so make sure you're familiar with that one. Okay, and then from multicellularity, we went on to start talking about examples of specialization within the plant. All right, so Where's your best example of that? The leaf, exactly. The leaf layers specifically. So would it be important to know what all the layers do and their names? Okay, and in the context of specialization. All right, so okay, these cells are specialized to do this. These cells are specialized to do this. As a result, they look different. Okay, these cells have lots of chloroplasts. These cells have none. Okay, these cells have more fiber because they're part of tubes and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, those are the things that we need to be able to explain clearly. Okay, when we're talking about the plant as an example of a multicellular organism with specialization. Okay, and so then the next natural step from that was to talk about all the parts of the plant. Okay, so do you need to be able to talk about how a plant transports water? Okay. Going to be a situational question about plant transport. Okay, here's a plant that's in this situation. How is plant transport going to be affected by this situation? Okay, so you'd have to say, well, plant transport works like this. Okay, and these are some factors that are important for it to work properly. In this situation, this is going to be affected. So this is what will happen to plant transport as a result. Okay, everybody kind of follow me on that one? All right, so important to be able to apply what we know. Yeah, certainly write down what you know. That's going to be part of it, but also then talk about it in the context of the question. Okay, and then parts of the plant, more than just roots, stem, and leaves. Okay, but also like phloem and xylem. Where do you find them? What do they transport? Okay, what forces do they use? Okay, things of that nature. Yeah, like osmotic pressure and gravity and right, like the phloem. Yes, that as well. Yeah. Okay, so there's a lot of material in this unit. So there's a lot of reading and note making and things like that that you'll need to do over the next week. Okay. Some people make like little like study cards, like recipe cards or whatever, plant transport, and then they write some stuff about plant transport. Okay, and that's good because that helps you remember the facts. Okay, but the other thing you need to be thinking about, and this is where that practice test will help you, is look at the questions and look at how do I ask about that stuff. Most of the time, it's not just strictly regurgitate what you know. It's okay. Here's something that's going on. Explain why that's happening. Explain how an organism reacts to that. Okay, it's all about application of what you know. Okay, so that's the kind of things you want to think about when you're pretty sure you've mastered the knowledge. Then start to apply the knowledge. Think of things on your own, okay? And that's always a good way. If you can think up questions that I might ask, that's one of the best things to do, okay, as a studying procedure, which is why I give you a few examples in that practice test. All right. That is, oh, sorry, plant growth and adaptation. I skipped something. Okay, so plant growth, development, adaptation, hormones, tropisms. Okay, and how do those work together? to adapt to the environment. Okay, to adapt to the environment. So make sure we're able to answer questions about that as well. Yes, that's tropisms or growth patterns, right? So you got your geotropism, thigmotropism, phototropism, okay, definitely. And those could be, again, questions in written response with a picture, right? Just like was on your practice test. I don't know if you've all looked at that yet, but on there's a couple of them, okay, where there's a picture of a tree or a plant or whatever, and you're being asked, okay, why is the plant doing this? Okay, what would cause this? Well, don't just say geotropism, gravity. Be a little more detailed than that. Okay, make sure you include lots of stuff about it. Mm-hmm. It's possible it could be in a multiple choice type of question. Okay, so it'd be more recognition. If I'm asking you to label a cell and give the function, then it'll be more of like kind of like what our quiz was, simple, kinds of things. Okay, that I think covers. Tomorrow we're going to talk a little bit more about adaptation to the environment and things like that. So it's something we've already talked about, but in a little bit more detail. And then that's the last of it. Okay, so that's what's on your test. Now, in terms of size here, there's possible there could be a couple of minor changes because I'm not done fiddling around with the test yet, but no. So it'll be similar in format to your chem test. Okay, there's going to be a multiple choice and written response. Thank you. So we are looking at 26 multiple choice. And 9 written. So there are 53 marks in the written response, 26 multiple choice for a total of 79. Your chem test was out of 84. Well, yeah, because they're like 4 or 5 mark questions, right? Like, I mean, there's you got to write a written response answer, right? So I'll be looking for certain points within those answers. Okay. There's only one question that has an A and a B, and it's the labeling question. So the rest of them are, here's the question, write an answer. Okay. So you can write this test in pen or pencil, okay, because there's a lot of writing. Sometimes it's smoother to write in a pen, okay, but the multiple choice part you should still have a pencil for, just in case you need to erase anything, right? You should have both a pencil and a pen for this exam, okay, and you gotta watch the time, okay, because when you're writing long answers, sometimes it's kind of easy to lose track of time, right? Because they're not broken up as much as the chem test, where it was, question 1, here's 7 balancing items. Okay, you kind of knew where you were at. But sometimes it's easy to get lost, especially time-wise, on a written response item. So just keep an eye on the time while you're writing it. Okay, I'll try and give you a little kind of warnings every 10 or 15 minutes just to let you know where you're at. Right? But that's what you got. Okay, so it's 4 marks less than your chem test. But there's quite a bit more writing, obviously, because there's not a lot of skill stuff for you to demonstrate to me here. Okay. Questions from you guys? All right, well, you got about 12 minutes or so to, 12 or 15 minutes here to go over the practice test, the review package, whatever that I gave you the other day, get your notes organized, okay, stuff like that.